Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We're going to get started here. So we'll let people come in as we do. We only have 40 minutes. We want to make this a nice, lively conversation. I'm Apurva Shah. I'm VP of Product Management and User Experience at Wiley. My main role right now is to launch our Wiley, the AI Gateway initiative that we launched a couple weeks ago at the Frankfurt Book Fair. This initiative is really intended to help connect expert content, scholarly content to the different AI tools and agents that users are using, that researchers are using. I also manage our user experience team, so a lot of my perspective on this comes from talking to users and researchers. So I'm really pleased to be in a dual role here. I'm both moderating the panel, but also panelist. And I'm also pleased to say we have absolutely no PowerPoint slides other than this one. So it's going to force you to actually listen to us talk. Um, the topic of this conversation is reimagining librarianship, empowering researchers in the digital revolution. Really, this is about, AI is changing the way that research and knowledge is discovered. We know this. It's also changing the way that the research and knowledge is created and the way that it's shared. And so we want to discuss how librarians can move from observers to essential architects in that responsible AI adoption at academic institutions. And so I'm pleased to have my esteemed colleagues here. I'm going to have Lisa and Mike introduce themselves, and then we'll just get into the discussion. The way it'll work is we'll talk for like 20 minutes on these topics, and then we're going to have halftime. And at halftime, we're going to just pause for your questions. We'll collect some of those questions, and then the rest of the discussion is really driven by what you want to talk about. So you have to pay attention because otherwise we're going to be done after 20 minutes. So let's have a good conversation here. So I'll pass to Lisa first. Introduce yourself.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Janicki Hinchliffe. I am a professor and a librarian at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and also write for the Scholarly Kitchen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Mike Streeter. I'm the Director of Research Integrity, Strategy, and Policy at Wiley. Just for some background on what that role means, we have responsibility for developing and implementing our integrity policies, but our team is also responsible for the maintenance of the scholarly record. So when it comes to integrity concerns that are raised either before or after publication or that come in from an internal source or an external source, our team has the responsibility for investigating those issues and for working with editors-in-chief of our journals to correct the record if that's necessary. Just for full disclosure, I'm also a member of the Committee on Publication Ethics Council, and I serve on the STM Integrity Hub Governance Board and the STM Research Integrity Committee. So again, thank you for being here, and looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Yeah, this will be fun. The first kind of big picture question is really about how is AI transforming research. Look, what we're seeing in our own work is that researchers are using AI significantly. It went from about 54% to about 86%. In our survey, we did about several thousand researchers around the world. Researchers using research in their work has gone up significantly. These researchers are using the tools that we're all aware of: ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Mistral. So this is happening right now, and I think it's a question of us: how do we confront that? And so my first question, for Lisa is, how is AI transforming research? What are you observing from the perspective of the university?
Sure. I mean, I think the study that you just cited and the data that Wiley has gathered is very similar to the data we're seeing elsewhere, right? Which is that, not unsurprisingly, our scholars who are, they're people who inquire. They want to create new knowledge. They're often looking for the latest, greatest techniques. They're testing this out. And I think what we're seeing is that they're also quickly deciding, where is this adding value and where is this causing more work, which I think is a very interesting thing. And we could talk about the teaching apparatus as well, but I think in research, we definitely see that a number of AI applications are just speeding up research or speeding up processes so significantly that it's one of these things where you're like, I never want to do it that way again. So same reason, I was actually explaining how to look up an article in Web of Science in the olden days when it was Science Citation Index to somebody who had never experienced that. And they're like, you did what? And I think with some of these AI applications, we're going to quickly see that same thing where somebody is going to be like, well, back in 2022, we had to. And so what I think is interesting is scholars are in a really interesting position because they're often they're testing things out for themselves, but they're also putting that into the literature for other people to know about. So I don't think we have to go through all the things that it's doing well and not. But I think we, as librarians, really need to remember that that's the community that we're serving, this community that is often very entrepreneurial, cutting edge, trying things out. And then librarians are that way too. So where are we trying things out? Where are we seeing where we can get those affordances, processing that can happen unbelievably faster, and maybe get through some of those backlogs that have existed since I was in library school? That'd be pretty awesome. So
Great. Mike, I'd love to hear your perspective as well. Can you think about AI transforming research from an integrity perspective? What are the concerns and kind of topics that are top of mind from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, one way that I'll frame this is to say that last week we launched our own sort of comprehensive set of AI guidelines that apply to not only how research is being done, but also privacy considerations and some of the integrity and ethics considerations around that. So, kind of the three main things I sort of take away from that is to think about roles, right? So researchers are not only doing research, they're also authors. In some cases, they are peer reviewers and they are editors in chief. And so there are different considerations that you need to bring as a stakeholder in each one of those roles in your use of artificial intelligence. Another way that we are thinking about it in the integrity space is, and you would see this in our guidelines that we've developed, is to really think very clearly about the instances where the use of artificial intelligence is required to be disclosed. And that impacts not only the research integrity component prior to publication, but some of the publication ethics issues that we think about as publishers. And I sort of draw an analogy to, we're used to, or we expect, or we require disclosures around conflict of interest. We require disclosures around funding. We require accurate affiliation disclosure, and we need to think about the use of artificial intelligence in a similar way. Clearly, they're different things, but it sort of leads to this kind of question about this sort of reproducibility part of the equation. And then finally, I mean, I really think about, we're thinking a lot about accountability and thinking about AI tools supporting research, but they aren't doing the research. They're being prompted to do certain levels of work. And so as an author, as a peer reviewer, as an editor, you're still accountable as a human for the decisions that you're making. And that accountability is extremely important.
Yeah. So Lisa, to the point about librarianship in this conversation, what do you see are those questions and concerns? And do you have examples of kind of what you've seen among your peers that they're bringing up as topics within this?
yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting to me because having lived through the internet revolution for libraries, this is the second time we've seen sort of a technology come in and really disrupt in some ways some very foundational things about librarianship that we've really had to grapple with. And I think we see in kind of an uneven grappling right now with some institutions, libraries, and I will put mine in this. And not anything to do with like my leadership per se, but my library immediately had a study group on generative AI and, led campus conversations about what are the implications of this for research, for teaching, for your own inquiry, et cetera, and was very active in pulling together a website that provides some guidance and assistance for people in their different roles so they could think about this in different ways. And I think that's a great example of librarians having some expertise that isn't necessarily the technological expertise. Kind of thinking back to Lorcan's talk, his plenary this morning, talking about the professional knowledge, the socio knowledge, and being able to say, like, look, what we can give to the campus is how we understand how information interacts with systems and how it interacts with the work people need to do. We're not going to be programming the large language model or we now have Illinois.chat, our own AI system. But the library has something to offer there, and we proactively stepped up and said, we're going to create these groups. So we were one of the earliest groups on campus to start to engage this question. I think the other thing, though, that we're also often, Mike just talked about, like, okay, the demand for disclosure, et cetera. Well, We all know as librarians that we spend a lot of time actually helping our faculty and students understand those requirements. What do they mean when they say X, Y, or Z? And so we quickly have to become sort of experts on those sorts of things. I think all librarians, I see Mark McBride out in the audience here today, and if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend you take a look at his Scholarly Kitchen post last week, or yeah, last week, where he talked about sort of some research that's been done about what librarian concerns are, what publisher concerns are, and the librarian concerns around this issue of reliability, transparency, accuracy of information, things that libraries have been doing, right? Providing that trusted body of knowledge to our campus for use. And what does that mean when sort of the provision of information goes through this kind of filtering of a chatbot and the like? So I think there's some real intersections with the kind of things publishers are struggling with, or I shouldn't say struggling, addressing. Maybe you're struggling or not. You're struggling in the same sort of way. So I think there's also some interesting conversations here about what are the intersections where we can make sure we're working collaboratively in this area. I don't know. Should I hand it over to you to react to that?
Collaboration or
Yeah, sure,
challenges?
why not?
No, I mean, I absolutely think, and we have been, I think, doing a good job of, or at least setting the stage for the way that we kind of collaborate around not only the guidelines. I think one of the things that I see as the biggest kind of opportunity here is, I think the term you used earlier, Apoorva, in your last session was kind of scholarly consciousness. And kind of reinforcing the sort of ethical use of these tools and the importance of that in respect to transparency as it relates to publication ethics. I mean, I think one of the things that keeps me up at night is we have consistently grappled with research integrity concerns at scale. And then there's the concern around whether artificial intelligence increases that scale to a point where the detection of that use of artificial intelligence becomes even more difficult, right? So that's not to say that that everything, it's not a credibility issue. I think in some cases, it's a detection issue. We know that some of these tools are being used in certain ways to undermine the publishing process. And so what we're focusing on a great deal is how do we put the right detection models in place, kind of from a position where we're not already in a kind of perfect way of finding those things out. I'm not doing a good job, I think, of explaining that piece, but the term paper mill comes to mind, right? And how paper mills might exploit an artificial intelligence tool to challenge the authenticity of the scholarly record.
Yeah, and it puts a lot of onus on us as publishers, but I think it's an opportunity for partnership here between libraries and publishers, because the content slop is real. I mean, we see this, the amount of AI-generated content has now exceeded the amount of human-generated content. And then AI is going to reference its own AI-generated content. And so you're getting to a point where, I talked about this in the previous session, there's a downward death spiral where the AI just kind of becomes useless because it's just wallowing in its own dirt, slop in its own slop. So this is one of those where the publisher librarian relationship is interesting, right? There's probably a view that like, oh, the publishers are just trying to extract as much rents as possible and we don't have money to give you any more. But I want to, like, is it Pollyannish, Lisa, to say that, hey, there's actually a real opportunity here for publishers who are driving the editorial and the peer review and the verification of trusted content to work more closely with librarians on this front and kind of and change the dynamic? Or is that just us as well? It's just Wiley trying to find another way to get money from us.
So I think there's some interesting questions here, and I probably, like, Michael did a much better job of his disclosures. It's almost like he works in research integrity. But I'm currently the co-chair of United to Act Against Paper Mills, a multi-stakeholder initiative to try and address this very question of the degree to which our long-standing mechanisms for producing a trusted record of scholarship is being challenged incredibly challenged by the paper mill activity, which certainly was accelerated by the advent of generative AI technologies and the degree to which, and some of you may have even caught, like, interestingly, Archive made an announcement last week that they will no longer accept any review papers on their preprint server unless they have already been peer reviewed by a conference or a journal. So that's a funny idea of a preprint, something that's already been reviewed. But they talked about, they like literally, it's taking down their review process to have so much of this contributed. But what I want to sort of draw a line back to with the librarians is that all of the people that are making use of these AI tools and submitting papers that were generated by a paper mill are educated by or working in a research institution. And so something has gone wrong in also our education, our performance assessment processes that has so many people availing themselves of what is clearly an unethical approach. So I think when it comes to students, I don't know who else on our campus has been teaching information ethics more than librarians. We haven't been teaching this particular area of information ethics, but we have longstanding curriculum that we could start to incorporate these concepts into, which is different than the AI literacy concepts, which I know we're also working on. But this question of ethical information practice, which seems to be like at the forefront of a lot of this. And I would argue that as a collective on campus, we're probably best positioned to offer information ethics, information ethical training, literacy, frameworks, et cetera. Doesn't mean we're training everyone. We might be building capacity on our campus for other people to do the training. But we have a mindset and an approach here that we've developed over a long time that could really help with that. So that helps with current students. And then, I think one of the other things that's going to happen is even in OA publishing where people are paying to publish, eventually our researchers aren't going to want their articles sitting next to paper mill content in the same journal title. So right now we don't have that, like, oh, this journal you published in has a ton of retractions for paper mill activity, but we're going to get there. And that's not going to be good for us. So I think we also have this role with our researchers that they need to be attending a lot more carefully to the context in which they're putting their work. So this might actually help out Michael in the long term, because maybe.
I could offer a comment on what you're saying. I mean, I think if we're talking about the kind of shared opportunity here, I mean, one of the things that we talk about as a publisher and what we've invested in from the integrity space, and there is an AI component to this, is investing in prevention rather than reaction, right? So a lot of what we're talking about with these guidelines and the sort of AI literacy piece of this is taking these issues kind of further upstream. So when we're talking about wanting to exercise more of a preventative posture in research integrity, we want to identify these cases of potential misuse or honest error of artificial intelligence prior to publication, before something goes out to peer review and before it makes it into the research record. So I mean, I think that that's where the opportunity is to ensure the types of guidelines and the types of sort of guidance that we are giving to authors and to editors and to peer reviewers is in general alignment with what the institution is doing to advance artificial intelligence literacy, but all to that kind of strategy of bringing things kind of further upstream in the process. And I think that that kind of intention to kind of move upstream is where that collaboration is going to be strongest.
Yeah. So we're right at halftime. So if you have questions, there's a microphone in the back. So just raise your hand. And I have one more question for Lisa, but that way we can start prepping for the halftime show and getting your questions. So start either walk up there or just raise your hand. But Lisa, are there policies that an institution can start to establish to start addressing some of these issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've actually seen a lot of institutions establish a number of different kinds of policies. So the first I'm going to talk about is my least favorite policy, which is the thou shalt not ever breathe in the direction of AI, which I think is not particularly helpful, especially as it's actually almost impossible to do one's scholarly work now without using AI, whether you want to or not. Now, whether you're going out to pursue some of the more advanced tools or the like is different, but I can assure you that like your basic word processor, all these things have AI embedded in them. So already it's weird to be like, don't use AI at the same time that the campus is like, here's Microsoft Word, which has AI in it, and et cetera. And it reminds me of the era we lived through. Every librarian of my age in the room, just take a moment, breathe deeply. You can't use the internet.
That was a thing.
Oh, it was a thing. And then we would be like, no, it's a scholarly journal. It's just accessed via the internet. It's fine. Your faculty member will be okay with it. Okay, the trauma. So here we are, right? Expanding access through digital collections, and then faculty being like, no internet, right? And they're trying to solve a problem, but with a bad policy. And that I think is what is happening at some institutions. And so they're really cutting off opportunity. I really worry about the opportunity that cuts off for students, including graduate students who are becoming researchers, because if research is being done with AI at the cutting edge, then what you're telling your students is we will not educate you in the mechanisms of the cutting edge research methodologies in your field. So it's really an issue in certain disciplines in particular. I think my own campus is my preferred. And you know, you got to remember, we invented the Mosaic browser at the University of Illinois. YouTube was founded by U of I undergraduates. So we're a place that loves technology all the time, more is better, et cetera. But there's really been an attempt to do two things. One is to empower individuals to explore and make their own decisions in an informed way. So there's an incredible infrastructure now of support, access to tools, access to experts who can coach you, and also that can kind of slot you in as like, are you a beginner? You can come to this level workshop. Are you trying to program your own large language model? Okay, we've got another workshop for you over here. Now, obviously, that's something we can do at scale at the University of Illinois. But this is another thing where libraries, because we work so much in collaboration, maybe this is something also our library consortia could be looking to, of how can we share and build some infrastructures across a state or a region, so not each of us needs to be doing it individually. So maybe you need to explain how the halftime show works, that we're not just doing a question, answer, question, answer.
No, we're collecting the questions, and then we'll have that be the guide for the second half of our conversation. So please raise your hand. We'd love to hear challenges you're facing at your institution, particular questions that might be on your mind. So go for it. Anybody want to jump in first? Question over here.
I'd like to hear more. My name is Rick Mallon from Pascal, which is a academic library consortium here in South Carolina. I'd like to hear more thoughts about how a library consortia or system can help pool resources at scale.
We're noticing in our vendor licenses that there are more restrictions on use of AI with the journal content. Like, how do you expect librarians to police how users are using content after they download it and then use it potentially with AI?
It seems there's a tension between what you just mentioned, Lisa, with AI being everywhere, you can't get away from it, and journals requiring disclosure if you use AI, and it seems like people maybe don't even know that they're using AI. How is that tension to be resolved, and what are journals really saying when one must disclose AI use?
So Lisa, you alluded to the fact that libraries were kind of the tip of the spear in the early days to help institutions move towards the digital transformation. Now there seems to be a lot of resistance that's coming from libraries with adoption of AI. And I would just like to hear, like, from you reflectively, what is that telling you about librarians right now? And what is that telling you about AI?
And who are you?
I'm Mark McBride from Ithaca SNR. Thank you, Lisa.
So that's 4 great questions, and we can take one more. Oh, there's one more? Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Tim Tully from San Diego State, and my question's for you gentlemen that work for Wiley. Since students are going to be using AI as discovery, are you seeing these AI, large language model companies as customers to sell access to your content to give better answers, which then could be a sales lead to selling journals to universities to the students who are then using the good information and then maybe taking a cut of those sales to the AI companies to turn some of those articles open? That's that's my question. Do you see them as a customer in the future?
I really like that, AI to open. Somebody's going to use that title. It's a new business model.
Great, great questions. Why don't we start with the first one about consortia and systems and how they can pull resources together to support this type of initiative. Let's go.
So I think that the very first thing is, so I'm in Illinois. We have CARLI, the Consortium of Academic and Research Libraries. And though I'm at the University of Illinois, which is gigantic, and 80 librarians and 80 tech people, blah, 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 in our library system, most members of CARLI are at smaller institutions, community colleges, 1 or 2 librarians. They have no capacity to do this kind of investigation. They can't have 5 people on a task force because they don't even have 5 people. So I think one of the things we could think about in our library consortia is how that is an opportunity for us to build knowledge and awareness through, especially if we could if you are a multi-type kind of library, academic library consortia where you have a U of I equivalent. So, how can you invite that kind of organization to share their knowledge across the ecosystem of the consortia? I think so that's knowledge, awareness, and then I would say capacity building is the way of thinking about that, is how do we build the collective capacity across our consortia by learning together? The next thing would be obviously to look at whether your consortia is kind of the buying club, as we say, and whether or not this issue of acquisition of particular AI embedded resources, or is there an opportunity for a relationship with a vendor, a third party, whether for profit or not for profit, in an area that would really help solve problems that your libraries in your consortia have? Because one of the things I think that really helps librarians is when we can experience technologies in such a way that they actually solve library problems too. And I guess I'm kind of going to plug in Mark's question here about library reticence. I think right now a lot of AI tools have created problems for libraries, but haven't solved many problems for libraries. And so I think especially at the consortial level, if there were an opportunity to say that, like, here is a tool that uses AI that can help us get through a backlog, digitize in metadata, identify where we need to do reparative data work, help us look across our consortia to see what our collections really look like in a collaborative way. I think having some utility out of AI would really help. I will say I was meeting with a vendor here who they asked me this question of, what are you looking for in an AI product? And I said, I'm not looking for an AI product. I am looking for a product that solves a problem. If you do that through AI, fine. But if you don't, that's okay with me too. I want problem solved. So consortia are amazing capacity builders in our field, and we have those in place. Other areas in higher education, if they knew what they could do through a consortia, they would be so jealous of the things that we are able to do this way. But the capacity building is a huge one.
Yeah.
So just to kind of address that sort of reticence question, because I know you're speaking to it from the kind of the library perspective. If I'm thinking about it from a publisher perspective, I think where we have seen that level of reticence, it's from journal editors who are primarily concerned about what's coming in the door and being able to verify that what's coming in the door is authentic and that it's a real article and that it's justified. And then I've kind of tied into that question about disclosure and sort of what does that look like? I mean, if there are certain policies at ULI about not being able to use AI in some way, shape, or form, those policies are certainly not consistent across the world. And we're a global publisher with content coming in and being submitted from all over the place. When we talk about disclosure, what we really want to understand is if you're using a tool in your actual research methods, in your process, we want to know, we want you to disclose as the author the ways in which you used that tool. We talked in your group talked in the last session about sort of reproducibility. And this is, I think, another component of that kind of need for transparency in scholarly publishing. And that's kind of what makes it that much more robust than something that you're going to find generally on the web. So disclosure is really about making sure that if you used Python, for instance, or another type of statistical tool, that's the type of thing that you would normally disclose in a methods section. That's the kind of thing that we want to see disclosed in the research article upon submission. So, I mean, I think I have also kind of learned to love the bomb in some ways. I mean, as an integrity person, we're generally pretty skeptical and conservative people. I mean, if we had our own way, these policies, we would have the same policies across the board. There would be no flexibility based on discipline, and everything would work the way that we wanted it to work, right? But that's not the world that we live in, right? So, I mean, I think that there is a balance that we need to strike. And so the way that we've been approaching this with respect to AI is that, again, kind of this question about detection, disclosure, and transparency, and also using other elements of our sort of integrity screening process to inform our trust of what's coming in the door. So,
yeah, Lisa, this point about digital transformation, and in the past, libraries led it. Clearly, it's who's leading it now at the campus. Is this an opportunity for partnership?
So, I mean, as I said, I think at some institutions, the libraries are leading. Typically, they're also then partnering with the IT units and the like. I think that this is also an area where, I mean, I think back to when I helped my institution put their very first classes online. It was entrepreneurial individual faculty, right? And so my guess is on any institution that we go to of size, over a few people, there's some faculty member who just got really interested in something on Thursday afternoon, worked all weekend and implemented it in their class on Monday. Probably violated a whole bunch of policies about whether you were allowed to click on the agreement, and maybe they just bought their own subscription and now they're using it in class, which is probably violating but all that being the case, faculty are very entrepreneurial people. They very much are looking to either teach better, do research better, et cetera. So that's the other thing I think we have to think about is how do you channel the entrepreneurial spirit, not control it? Because the moment you sort of clamp down on it, first of all, the faculty get really irritated and you end up in an adversarial position relative to your researchers, your learners. And I kind of feel like that's maybe a little bit of what's happening with research integrity here as well. But I will say I am very interested to hear you. So I'm going to put you back on this question of that we are hearing a lot about at the same time that publishers are sort of leading certain AI, initiatives. They're also putting in our contracts, you library will declare that no one will do any AI thing to the PDF, which honestly, I'm going to put that in the same category personally as the institutions that are like, there shall be no AI. That does not seem that doesn't seem reflective of the world we're in. So what's causing that? And how can we partner to get past that sort of reactive mode?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And I would love to hear Michael's perspective on this too. One of the reasons why that clause often ends up in our contracts is because of our society partnerships and the fact that we publish journals on behalf of societies who want those restrictions. And so we have to control for that. I think that the policing and that we have to make it easier for our partners, our customers, to provide AI rights, and that's onus is on us, because I think the responsibility of librarians to police that is almost impossible. We know it's happening, and so we have to create a legal pathway to allow this. And I mean, that's what, just speaking kind of specifically about our AI Gateway initiative, the way we've tried to create that infrastructure is to allow essentially AI use of that content and do it through the secure means where you're not passing the full text through to the AI agent. You're passing over snippets, and that allows for a lot more flexibility among our partnerships and our societies than for us to say, hey, we are now shipping over full text. Because I think that there are concerns among authors and among some of our partners to not have that happen for many reasons, including the fact that some of these different AI tools don't guarantee that they won't train off of your content. And that's probably one of the biggest drivers of this, right? Is that if you're using a free version of ChatGPT and you upload your PDF to it, it's highly likely that that tool is going to train off of that content, and we don't want that to happen. And so, and the authors don't want that to happen. So there's some nuances here that I think we have to navigate. And it's about having pathways that are kind of easier, so that you don't have to do this type of policing. But Michael, I'd love to hear your perspective too.
Yeah, well, I mean, the negotiations on the license side is outside of my sort of expertise area, but I will not defer the question or kind of slither away from this. I mean, I guess the way I sort of think about it is this is all relatively new. Is this, you can hear? Okay. This is all relatively new space, right? So we're approaching this at a certain frequency, which I think is, conservative at this point because the nuance of it is unknown. And so I think that as we sort of, kind of continue to get comfortable with some of this, then those usage restrictions, may lift in one way, shape, or form. I'm not making a commitment because it's not my commitment to make, but I think probably you've made a lot of the right points about the potential kind of repurposing of this content that was never intended by the copyright owner or the person that holds that exclusive license. So that's a place that we need to be protective. And I guess an analogy that I'll draw is, one of the policies that we have in place right now is that peer reviewers should not be uploading submitted manuscripts to an AI tool to enable them to do peer review for a couple of reasons. One is that they're accountable as people to do that peer review work. And two, it's the same issue around privacy and reuse rights. That author never gave you the permission to potentially give away those rights to a tool as a peer reviewer. But there could be a point down the road where we're able to create tools that can support peer reviewers to do their work in a way that's confidential and is done in a closed space. So, I mean, I think that kind of points to this analogy around this progression about what we're comfortable with now and what we might be able to be comfortable with kind of further down the road.
There was one question about, students using AI as discovery, and do the AI companies become customers? Maybe. I mean, I think there's some experimental ideas there around, doing some type of royalty share, some pay-per-use thing. Maybe. What we found in our partnership so far with Anthropic and Perplexity is that it's a lot easier to view it more as a kind of non-monetary partnership, where we're really talking about that as a platform, a browser, if you could say, that will integrate our content in a secure way. And in exchange for some agreements, like we're not going to train on that content, and we're going to make it easily available, and you can authenticate your access to that. And so I think that there's some opportunities here. I love the idea of AI to open. Honestly, it's something we had not really considered before. So it's an interesting idea of, hey, could you use techniques like that to then open it up? One of the other ideas that we'd been talking about is imagine a world that it's open for human readers, but paid for AI bots. Cloudflare has come out with this new thing called pay per crawl, where they are, in theory, they've created an infrastructure to allow AI agents to pay on a transactional basis when they want to crawl and get content from a particular publisher. We haven't seen anything out just yet, but you could imagine a world where you kind of have that type of mix where a human reader can access that open content for free on the website, but if an AI bot hits it, they have to have some type of transaction and pay for that. So that's an idea. Again, we haven't seen any of this happen, but it's a kind of an opportunity for experimentation. We are at time. Any final thoughts from Lisa or Mike before we wrap this up?
If only we had 10 more minutes, I think we could figure this out.
That's right.
I would say I just think the questions were great here today, and I'm really heartened by the sort of the depth of the questions that I'm hearing. This is a way advanced conversation than I think where we were a few months ago. So it's heartening.
I fully agree. I mean, I think the successes that we have made, at least thus far in the last year or so, is kind of just alignment around principles with respect to the ethical use of artificial intelligence. And I think that that is a key thing, not only at the publisher level, but at the editor level, at the library level, at the institutional level. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to continue to be focused on. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.